We're good.
Cool. Alright, so I'm going to get started here. I broke my jaw last week, so if you can't hear me, you may want to move forward. I don't want to scream too much, because I could fracture my jaw, and that would not be fun for any of us. Anywho, hi, that's me, sitting over there, about 2 weeks ago. I'm Nick Radford. I work at Dell. I play hockey, and that's the jaw fracture, if anyone's into that. Again, I work at Dell, where I'm the lead developer of the Common UX project. And what that means is that I lead a team of 4 developers that develops an Angular-based UX UI library to basically deliver the Dell brand to 20-plus products across BUs, business units, and into different parts of Dell. So a little bit of history of how my project got to where it is today. It started with a company called Quest Software, which was acquired by Dell about 2 years ago now. And at Quest, there was a problem. We had... Oh, that's a fun side. I should have practiced this. So there was a problem at Quest. Quest grew by acquisition, much like any large software company, where they're like, I like what your product does, I'm going to buy you. And they're going to slap their smelly door logo on it. That's what we called it. And some fonts and colors, and ta-da, you had, a rebranded product. And that created the good, bad, and ugly of software. I love that one. That's good. Anyway, so you would have products that looked a little bit like these. These are from a PowerPoint I got about 2 years ago. I don't actually have real screenshots of these, but they paint the picture. So, smelly door, cheesy 90s graphic, just colors all over the place. There are like 8 different blues on here, maybe. I don't understand. This was a fun one. Someone watched The Matrix one too many times, I think. Then, just it was all over the place, right? Like, I'm going to go back through these. Everyone squint. Squint and look at the screen. Do any of those look like they come from the same company at all? Like, seriously. And there's a problem with marketing. Marketing was trying to package these four-plus products together and sell them at trade shows and stuff like that. And professionals were like, what are you doing? None of this looks right. It looked like Christmas, right? Because, like, you get together with your family and you just have all this different wrapping paper and it's assaulting your eyes. So we set out to create a toolkit that developers could use to basically deliver a style guide in an easy fashion. And this original toolkit was built on top of jQuery. It was a jQuery plugin, essentially, where you would add something to the DOM, find it later, and turn it into whatever it was destined to be. A button, a tree, whatever, right? So our goal was to empower developers who had no business doing UI to do UI well. And the end result, and these are actual screenshots from those same 4 products later, ended with a relatively consistent visual language across applications. So we're going to do a squint test again. Everyone squint. It's pretty similar, right? Ta-da! So what did we do? This is actually the last slide I have because I hate slides. Seriously. So what did we actually do? We were able to codify a style guide, essentially, and deliver that to basically back-end developers that were writing ASPX or some bastardization of HTML and allow them to create a more consistent visual experience from application to application. So fast forward about a year after the first version of QE, which is what it was called, which stood for Quest UI back when we were Quest, and Dell decided to drop $4 billion, I think, to acquire something like that. A whole lot of money. Something. A bunch of money. Threw a bunch of money at Quest and bought us. And then the visual language changed, we had to update a whole bunch of stuff. And the Q became a C, into what we call QE now. So I'm going to give you a little look at what our old version of QE was. I talk with actual code usually, so enjoy. So we would have large pieces of branded UI that a developer could come in and use as a jQuery plugin. I'll zoom in a lot here for you. So in order to get an app header, you would just grab onto your body and create an app header and pass in some parameters. And you would get what you see here. This website is buggy. All right. About box is like your typical, I'm going to show you license information and contact information, stuff like that. And these were all big pieces of UI that legal wanted in applications, and people who were in charge of the Quest style guide, which eventually, lots of politics later, became the Clarity style guide, wanted in applications and needed to be consistent from application to application. So in functionally, like one line of code plus a whole lot of configuration, you're able to get this thing that you can then use in your application. So we're all familiar with UI toolkits, right? Another way to describe it is like Bootstrap for Dell, in a way. You just, other things like sign-in screens, start screens. And then you get down to your lower level components like buttons, alerts, calendar, stuff like progress bars. Very, very simple stuff. So fast forward like a year and a half later, when Angular and Knockout were all like kind of fighting, and some people say someone won, I say Angular. We decided to refactor QE into an Angular JS framework, right? And this bought us a lot of things. So instead of having to pollute your DOM with a whole bunch of nodes that you just grab onto later to create things in this jQuery soup of a mess of code, you could write more declarative Angular markup for your applications. So, you do not need to see Angular's website. So, I don't know where I'm going with this. That's fun. There we go. So, just to reiterate, instead of having to do something like QE button and pass in some configuration, you just use Angular and do that. So, some cool things about what we've done, and Alex is going to talk about some tooling stuff that we've done too in a minute. Did not practice this at all. Is it obvious? It's obvious. Okay. So, we were able to basically translate all these jQuery plugins into Angular directives and deliver these large pieces of UI to our developers so they could use them in their applications and build modern, powerful web applications that aren't completely reliant on jQuery, essentially. So some interesting things that we have in the newer version of QE are like the application frame, where it kind of ties together a few different concepts of, we call this the Dellbow, the Dell elbow. So as you can see, so it has a masthead and a navigation list and all sorts of stuff like that. You can nest controls. And through all this, we found a whole lot of things that are just hard in Angular. Selective transclusion is what we like to call it, is a very interesting problem in Angular. What if you need to transclude something into a couple different places, but based on, for example, the application frame, you transclude the content. That was the original thing that you transcluded. But then we were like, oh, well, how do we get buttons up in the masthead? That's a hard problem. Do we pass an object into it? What do we do? So we just have other directives that we now have to coordinate this concept of selective transclusion, where you say, transclude these DOM elements into this part of the DOM, so the button's up here, and the content into a whole other part. Okay. So on top of base directives, and we have near feature parity with what we had in our 1.8. I think I can reopen that. No, I can. What we had in QE 1.8, we have near feature parity. There's a lot of things lacking just by the nature of switching to Angular, not relying on a whole bunch of third-party components. we're building basically everything from the ground up as much as we can. And the reason for that, I'm really rambling. Okay. So we wanted to own a lot more of our code instead of relying on third-party tools, because the development cycle is faster within our team than, say, Kendo, Telerik, Kendo. Are we familiar with Kendo? Yeah, so there was going to be times where we would submit a bug request, or a bug request, bug report saying, well, this doesn't work in whatever browser, and here's all of our environment stuff. And usually the answer is just like, okay, that's how it's designed to work, or something. Like, there's a feature missing completely, and it was just very standoffish, and they were just kind of, go on, pay us more money. So where we've been able to do, what am I trying to say? We're able to own code a lot more, and when we get bug reports or feature requests from our customers, which are Dell developers, we can usually iterate on that within 2 weeks and get a new build out for them. And instantly, everyone who uses QE has that new feature. So it's kind of cool. So we have several other controls, like a data grid that we've built that uses a data source service that we built, which adheres to Dell standards for, well, some Dell standards for RESTful APIs. There are certain headers that the Dell API spec says needs to be on each request, stuff like that. And just through and through, we're trying to deliver the Dell brand. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the bulk of what I wanted to show. Services are fun too. We have a fun service called the Alert Service, which ties in with the application frame. So it's injectable into your controller, and you just call it with some properties, so content type. There are like expiration properties too, so that you can show alerts in your application. That was developed by Alex. Cool kid. So, I mean, I really just wanted to kind of give an overview, not get too deep technically into what we're doing, unless there are many questions. But I think the interesting things to note is that team of 4 developers, we are crossing probably 3 or 4 business units within DSG alone, and we've started, DSG is Dell Software Group, which is basically Quest plus a couple other acquisitions. And we've started recently to branch out across different parts of Dell, including like the end user computing division. They're going to be trying to put something on basically 40 million PCs a year that would be using this framework, which is pretty cool, I think. So any initial questions about kind of what we do? Yeah.
You said you have 4 developers in your team. Do you work with designers outside your team, or do you have designers from outside? Or do you just do this?
Sure. Magically. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have there's a team within Dell called the Enterprise Experience. I don't remember what the E stands for. Dell's full of TLAs, which is an acronym for 3-letter acronyms. It's kind of redundant. So there's a team called EDG, I think it's Experience Design Group, and they've developed a set of web guidelines for applications, for web applications, and we build roughly to their specs. Frequently there are just things that a developer sees that a designer doesn't necessarily. So there's a little bit of back and forth between the two teams. Oftentimes, the designs that we put out, the code that we put out is going to be ahead of whatever gets actually captured in design here. And that's just by nature of the organization. They're a little slower and they have a lot of stuff on their plate. So frequently, we'll see something, we'll implement it to our best, and then we'll tweak it a little bit to clean it up, so to speak. So. Anybody else?
So you have 3 different screens up there?
Oh yeah, that's fun. So yeah, this is a way to just mock what some of our responsive-ish styling, yeah, ish is a big asterisk. What some of our styling would look like on sort of different form factors. So you see the application frame in this screen, which is just your desktop screen. This is an iframe, by the way. This whole inner part is an iframe that dynamically loads content, which is actually fun because this is live editable, so I can change like the content of that button and it modifies. Anyway, iframe in here, and then we just mock what things could look like on an iPad, or more politically correct, a tablet and a phone. So that's probably best illustrated by that, or like the about box, which just breaks to all hell, to be honest. Start screen's a good one. So. We also have this thing we call the Scratchbone, which is kind of like JS Fiddle, but completely sandboxed. For legal reasons, because no one can copy JavaScript off a website. We're not allowed to put our stuff up on something like JS Fiddle or all of that stuff. So we got around that by basically implementing our own. So you could write QE, you could write Angular code using QE directly inside of here, and it persists some of that content in the URL by basically base64 encoding the content in here and dumping it at the end of the URL. Hacky, but it works.
So do you deliver a lot of your assets over the air then? So if you change a color or a logo or a styling, or are you giving them something that they copy and paste?
Sure. So there's a, on our website, you can either download a zip, or there is a way, we have a private Bower repository set up. So if you have the right keys, essentially, if you have access to our Git repo on Stash, then you'd be able to install using Bower. So then all they would need to actually include on their site would be the JavaScript and CSS. All of our templates are pre-cached via ng template, or I forget exactly how that solution works, but we codify all of our templates and dump them in the top of the QE.js file. Yeah.
Learning Angular myself recently, and talking about the people that are working on it too. The most common things that I hear about is learning about how Angular scales and how to build large applications. What would you say you learned in building a large Angular application, especially working with so many different people? Refactoring code, division of labor. I mean, that's kind of a pretty catch-all question.
Sure.
I guess anything that sticks out in your mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really easy to just dump everything on your scope and, access it all that way. But scoping is really quite difficult. If you're building a set of directives like we are, if you're building a UI library like we are, that's one thing that we found. We haven't actually built an Angular application. We give this out to developers to build. We don't do like a contracting thing within Dell. But I think the largest thing is definitely that separation concerns and using controllers and services when you need to, instead of basically putting everything in a link function on a directive, or more usually in a controller function, I guess that'd be. So I don't have too much experience actually building out a large-scale Angular application, which is ironic because I build a toolkit for Angular developers.
Do you get a lot of email?
I get a ton of email. I recently transitioned to being the lead developer. This was in the last basically 2.5 months. And more of my time is dedicated to Outlook.
So how many developers do you have using this?
That's a hard question. I have a spreadsheet that shows me the number of teams. So we have about 20 teams using this in different fashions. I'd say I don't think anyone is actually shipping with the Angular version yet. Most teams are still on 1.x, 1.8, which is the jQuery-based version. And that's just because of the nature of a large organization. It takes a lot of time, and it's a large investment to switch from a jQuery toolkit to an Angular toolkit. So I'd estimate easily 40 plus developers, 50, probably more. We don't have a really good way of reporting back and keeping in touch with people about their usage and their concerns. So
it's mostly just getting developers, or you have some kind of like system where they actually get constructive feedback.
yeah, so we have a couple Jira collectors up here, which allow them to submit issues to our backlog, and same for feature requests. And that assumes that they're on Stash or on Jira, which is part of the Atlassian stack. That's our primary way of keeping track of feature requests and bugs, but still lots of emails and manually adding things to the backlog and giving them links. We also have an internal Commons website, so we have a space there. It's basically like Confluence, but it's a message board type thing. Called Jive. Jive is a Java nonsense thing. So we use that a lot. We have a common UX space in there, and we get a lot of conversation there. We also use HipChat as well. So we have a HipChat room that those who are hip enough to be on HipChat can ping us pretty much whenever we're around.
This is truly a selfish question. Can you talk about the multiple SKUs?
Sure. Alex, do you want to? Because you developed that?
Sure.
This could be a good time for us to switch off. He's got some stuff about tooling, so he can maybe answer your questions there
Yeah.
initially. So, thank you guys.